Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Buffalo. My name is Tracey Kassman. I am your friendly neighborhood worship associate for today. We're happy to bring you this service live and in person, and also over Zoom. A special good morning to everyone who is watching from home. Good morning! For those of you who are here, I remind you that we ask you to wear your masks during the service and to sit in seats where the cushions are down. After our service today, if for some miracle it stops raining, there will be fellowship time outside on the patio. And also, usually on Sundays from 12:30 to 2:30, everyone is invited to join for a multi-generational bring your own picnic. However, I think my mic is on. You can't hear me? That's awful. Okay. Well, thanks so much for that. I can't stand any closer. It's just physiologically impossible due to COVID. Certainly not to donuts. In any event, coming up on July 25th, on a day which I hope is much drier than today, our July's Share the Plate recipient, Locust Street Art, is going to have a garden art event. If that doesn't sound like fun, I don't know what. So come on and let your inner artist out. Today's service is brought to you by me, Liz Parke, Sharon Walker, and Martha Malkiewicz. We all had the good fortune to attend the Jubilee 3 workshop. Jubilee 3 is a 2.5-day anti-racism training that helps develop one's capacity to build more inclusive environments. How do we learn to see barriers to inclusion? Why is it, after all these years, we are still struggling with the same issues about racism and classism? What are we missing? Some participants say that the experience has been life-changing. A little bit. Some have said that they were beginning to realize how much they didn't know. Also a little bit. Many say that they were renewed in their commitment to cultural change after doing Jubilee 3. The new curriculum is designed for a virtual environment. There are no prerequisites. It's a bit about history, a bit about self-examination, a bit about current events, and a lot about spiritual growth. UUs and friends from all over the country participate. There are big plenary sessions and small working groups. There is no judgment about where you are, where you're at when you join for the work, but there is a whole lot of love. The next session is Friday. Honestly, July 16th through 18th. If you're interested, see any one of us and we'll get you where you need to be. And now let us enter into a space of worship with the words of Antoine Rose. I am not what you think. I am confused and afraid. I wonder what path I will take. I hear that there's only 2 ways out. I see mothers bury their sons. I want my mom never to feel that pain. I am confused and afraid. I pretend all is fine. I feel like I'm suffocating. I touch nothing, so I believe all is fine. I worry that it isn't. Though I cry no more, I am confused and afraid. I understand people believe I'm just a statistic, I say to them, I'm different. I dream of life getting easier. I try my best to make my dream come true. I hope that it does. I am confused and afraid.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me in saying the chalice lighting words. We gather in loving community, inspiring one another to transform ourselves to create a more just and compassionate world.
God, I know, we're just here like all the time.
So today's story for all ages was written by Reverend Karen Johnson, and it's called Our Principles as a House of Love. Tracey, did you know that love is a really big deal in Unitarian Universalism? I bet you did, because we just can't stop talking about it.
I know, Liz. Love this. Side with love of that. Justice is what love looks like in public. We weren't the first ones to say that. Dr. Cornel West was, but we love it so much we sing it back to him and the universe all the time.
There was once a scientist guy who asked all kinds of people, not just Unitarian Universalists, what they thought of love and how important it was for them. His name was Robert Miller. It turns out that out of all the groups he studied, whether religious or not, UUs rank love as a core value more so than others do.
I guess love is really a big deal for us UUs.
Now, I'm going to want you to remember that, because we're going to come back to that later.
Another big deal in Unitarian Universalism is our principles. They're a big part of our covenant with each other.
We know the principles are a big deal because we have so many ways to talk about them to make sure all the different brains and bodies and ages understand them. There's this way, which is really a list in English. 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part.
And then there's this way, in the language of kids. 1, we believe that each and every person is important. 2, we believe that all people should be treated fairly and kindly. 3, we believe that we should accept one another and keep a learning together. 4, we believe that each person must be free to search for what is true and right in life. 5, we believe that all persons should have a vote about the things that concern them. 6, we believe in working for a peaceful, fair, and free world. 7, we believe in caring for our planet Earth, the home we share with all living things.
And then there's one called a principles wheel, which I'm going to ask you to imagine, but it was created by the Reverends Ian Riddell and Kimberly Debus. And it's a non-linear way of thinking about the relationships between these principles. So it has the first principle right in the middle, surrounded by the next 5, and the 7th as a ring around all of them, holding them together. So many ways.
All of these ways are focused on 7 principles. When Unitarian Universalism first came into being in 1961, there were only 6 principles. Our 7th principle was proposed in 1985 and added in 1987. One way to imagine our principles was originally suggested by Reverend Barbara Wells Ten Hove. It's called a keystone arch. This is like a doorway through which we enter into what faith has called us towards.
It's kind of cool because the 4th principle, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, is at the center, at the keystone, holding together the space for us to balance between each individual's inherent worth and the needs of the great community of which we are all a part. But do doorways or archways ever exist all by themselves, just floating in air?
Not really, right? They usually are stabilized on the ground, a part of a larger building or structure.
So maybe there's a principle that is still missing.
Just like we figured out 35 years ago when we decided that the 7th principle was missing. Maybe the missing principle is the ground upon which the doorway is built.
Maybe it's the whole house of love we are always trying to create for ourselves, each other, and the world.
Maybe if we add an 8th principle, we will get closer to the beloved community we dream about, where there is no oppression of any kind, where we can say Black Lives Matter, but we don't have to because they already do.
I want to be a part of building this house of love. Do
Don't
you?
you? It's me again. Okay.
Offering, I didn't give you any offering.
That's right, because I got it right here. Never fear. This is a house of transformation. We who inhabit it are the living embodiments of our own principles. We hold each other up here inside the hedge, and we reach out beyond to discover others and put our energy to making a more just and compassionate world. When we bring a monetary offering, we are holding up the foundation necessary for our transformation. We are sharing our gifts with other organizations whose work we support, literally and figuratively. So give big, because there's a lot of work to do. This month, we are sharing a good portion of our collection with Locust Street Art. LSA provides free art classes to anyone age 4 to 94, and probably 95. What began as a free class in Molly Bethel's home grew into a pillar of the community, not only for art classes, but for camaraderie, social and economic equality, and a safe space for personal growth. You can use PayPal by going on our website, www.buffalo.uu.org, and clicking on the blue donate button, or you can send a check by mail to the Unitarian Universalist Church Buffalo, or you can put one right in the offering plate coming down any minute now. If yours is a gift to our Share the Plate ministry, please write SHARE on the memo line, and it will be shared between the Locust Street Arts Center and the church operating budget. If yours is a welcoming gift to our congregation, please write Pledge 2021 on the memo line. Either way, write UUCB on the important line, and we will do the bookkeeping.
So our service today is to take a look at the proposed eighth principle that calls on us to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressive actions, such as intolerance, segregation, and discrimination, in ourselves and our institutions. How did our beloved country, the country founded in 1776 on the ideals that all people are created equal and that all people have fundamental rights such as liberty and due process of law, how did our country get so involved in racism and oppressive actions? How does intolerance, segregation, discrimination, and ultimately the blindness to the effects of it all begin? Greed, money, profit. You know, we started out okay. We did have 20 slaves come to the Virginia Wealth Colony, Jamestown, in 1619. But slavery at that time was quite different. Slaves were more like the poor white indentured servants. They could earn money. The slaves could earn money. Some even succeeded in buying their freedom. Slaves could marry, and their families always stayed together. And best of all, the children of anyone who was enslaved, their children were born free. The Commonwealth of Virginia was the wealthiest and most populated colony, and it made its money by planting crops like cotton and tobacco. As the colony grew, colonists claimed more land, and they needed more labor. The cheaper the labor, the better. So how did the U.S. get this cheap labor? Well, they did have indentured servants, and they had these slaves that could move into freedom. So what they did was they gradually took the ability of the enslaved people away. First, they took away their ability to earn their freedom. In 1662, this is before we were a country, a Virginia law went into effect that said the children of enslaved women were still slaves. They were no longer born free. Didn't matter who the father was. And then in 1669, a law was passed allowing slave masters to kill or torture enslaved people who resisted. Then in 1676, Bacon's Rebellion was a critical turning point in creating race-based slavery. The after effects of the rebellion were that the wealthy landowners realized that they could not control the much larger working class people, which were at that point made of indentured servants who were white and slaves who were black. Planters decided, let's divide the two classes and pit them against the other. They passed laws that increasingly distinguished between the people of African descent and the people of European descent. These laws said that people of African descent are hereditary slaves, thus defining that the lower class whites are superior to the lower class blacks. In 1787, just a few years after the founding of the U.S., Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution of the United States declared that any person who was not free would be counted as 3/5. The purpose of this was to create congressional representation, and this meant that people who owned slaves were of a greater number than the people who did not own slaves and therefore had more political power. Enacted by Congress in 1793 was the first Fugitive Slave Act, which authorized local governments to seize and return escapees to their owners and imposed penalties on anyone who tried to help the enslaved. There was some hope. In 1820, amid growing tensions over the issue of slavery, Congress passed the Missouri Compromise, and that limited slavery in the new states. But 30 years later, it was repealed. And in 1857, the Supreme Court passed the Dred Scott case. This declared that a black man, whether slave or free, has no rights that a white man is bound to honor. By 1860, 13% of the US population was enslaved. Slave trade was the primary market in the US. You could take what was earned in railroad and banks and factory markets, you can combine them, and it was not as great as the value, the market value of slaves. Thank goodness the Civil War ended the industry of slavery. The US had the opportunity to create a land of freedom for all, pursuit of happiness for all. How'd we do? Greed and profit, and now well-defined racism, spoiled many good ideas. Whites have continued to receive advantages over people of color. Here's a good idea. Let's give land to the poor working class so they can improve where they are. Ah, yes, but we took the land from the natives and we distributed it only to whites. How about the 13th Amendment? That's when the federal government said, slavery is abolished. There will be no slavery in the US. Yeah, but black codes and Jim Crow laws were created by state and local governments that countered the good that the 13th Amendment was doing. These states took away voting rights from blacks, controlled where blacks lived and how they traveled, and allowed the seizure of black children for labor purposes. All right, let's go further. Plessy versus Ferguson, the Supreme Court decision declaring separate but equal. Again, it had a chance, but separate was never equal. The GI Bill, another good thing. It subsidized employment, suburban home loans, college opportunities for GIs, but only white GIs, not black or people of color. Well, then let's try busing. Let's do something to create this inequality in our schools and in our cities. And that led to white flight and the tax collapse of urban areas, creating poorly funded inner city neighborhoods and schools. How about the 1970s, the war on drugs? That's good. Let's get the drugs off the street. Let's help people. Let's get all those drug dealers away. Oh, wait. That meant the mass incarceration of black and brown people for non-violent offenses. And then we moved into the 3 strikes and you're out level. 2013, our Supreme Court strikes down key elements of the Voting Rights Act, leading to the reduction and closing of polling places in underserved neighborhoods. This is so alive in our today. We have a lot to do. Understanding the effect of our history gives us a start on our journey to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressive actions in ourselves and our institutions. We do have a lot to do.
I want to speak to you about the insidious nature of privilege. During our work at Jubilee 3, Reverend Dr. Leon Spencer led us in a meditative kind of exercise. I say meditative because his voice was like a soothing hug from your favorite uncle. He spoke slowly, allowing thoughts and reactions to bloom inside me. He asked this simple question: When did you know that you had a racial identity? There were other questions after that, but that one really stuck with me. Now, I'm reading a very important book. It's taking me a long time, but I am doing it. It was recommended to me during Jubilee 3. It's called Caste, The Origin of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. Caste explains the powerful hierarchical system in place in our country that puts whites at the top of a huge shape-shifting, unspoken, race-based caste pyramid, Wilkerson says. As we go about our daily lives, caste is the wordless usher at the top in a darkened theater. Flashlight cast down in the aisles, guiding us to our assigned seats for a performance. The hierarchy of caste is not about feelings or morality. It is about power. Which groups have it and which do not. It is about resources. Which caste is seen as worthy of them and which is not. Who gets to acquire and control them and who does not. It is about respect, authority, and assumptions of competence. Who is accorded these and who is not. These insidious, unspoken assumptions about power, resources, and respect are ever present. They are baked into us and reinforced by the media, by public policy, and by economics. When Reverend Dr. Spencer asked that question, when did you know that you had a racial identity? It occurred to me that I never really have to think about my racial identity except when I'm filling out forms. I am the part of the dominant culture. My life is full of privilege. My privilege is something I take for granted. I move through my life unencumbered by things that my friends of color have to be mindful of every day. So how does this privilege permeate our culture? One way is through continued use of racial stereotypes. The mammy, the sambo, the coon, the sapphire. These stereotypes were used in post-slavery era to anesthetize us to the evils of slavery. You know, Hattie McDaniel's character, Mammy, in Gone with the Wind, strong woman ready to face down the Yankee soldiers to preserve the people who owned her. The subtle message is, if a good, strong woman like Mammy felt that way, then slavery really couldn't be all that bad. See, they're happy with the way things are. During Jubilee 3, we watched the film with images of so-called Golden Age cinema, and I realized how insidious the nature of privilege is, how seductive it is to be entertained and to think that these images were something in the past. Are these images far removed from me in my life? Maybe. Until I realize how the image of a predatory Negro from Birth of a Nation, remember that one, leads directly to a white woman in Central Park calling the cops on a bird watcher of color. Until I hear someone call Michelle Obama an angry black woman as she comments on injustice. I took a note later in the workshop. Immature innocence or ignorance on the part of the dominant group about the suffering of oppressed and marginalized groups lends energy to supremacy. The immature innocence means thinking that I'm not responsible for slavery. I didn't do it. It may be true that I come from German immigrant stock, and my people were not even here at the time of slavery. But that ignores the fact that when my people came over, they were already part of a system that kept whites above people of color. They had to instant step up. So if I stay in my bubble and think that my immigrant ancestors had nothing to do with slavery, and that makes me innocent of the myriad of ways in which power, resources, and respect are denied to people of color, then I perpetuate the supremacy. The antidote to this insidious disease is to educate ourselves to its existence and to be mindful of the ways in which that wordless usher guides us to our seats for the performance, not considering who is sitting behind us or before us. So the next time you're watching TV or reading the newspaper, check yourself. Do these images you see represent reality or perpetuate a stereotype designed to keep you separate and not equal to people of color? And if something is troubling you and you feel something is wrong, but you're not sure why or how, reach out and find out. Let's journey together.
Good morning. The following are quotes from my notes at the UUA Jubilee 3 session that I attended this past April. White identity was formed as a manner of control. Racism has the power to render the owning class invisible while they continue to amass wealth, resources, and control the labor force. Initially requested by Philadelphia area UU congregations, it was open to all interested UUs. Philadelphia UUs are banding together to fight racism, focusing on police violence upon Black and brown people in their area. Our UUs of color participating that day told their stories of fear, anger, and pain. These are stories that take place across the nation and in our own backyard. During the course of this conference, I was constantly reminded of our own racial inequity issues in Western New York, considered to be among the most segregated areas in the country. It's a tale of two worlds. Looking to the past and the Depression-era practice of redlining, neighborhoods were color-coded. Green, having all whites, was labeled the best. Green communities received access to better housing and low-interest loans. Neighborhoods of people of color were considered the riskiest and delineated in red and actually labeled hazardous. The policy in these hazardous areas was not to lend. Insurance premiums were also based on this formula, with the highest being in these hazardous areas. These policies were in place until the mid to late 70s. Add to this, the GI Bill was enacted after World War II, with home loans that were only available to the white GIs. Low-interest federal loans flowed to the white GIs and white men, resulting in a mass white migration to our now labeled inner suburbs. Many moving to the sundowner towns of Tonawanda and North Tonawanda. In these towns, African Americans and other minorities could not own property and were only allowed to be there from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Forming in the 1890s, with the enactment of civil rights laws, sundowner towns began to diminish in the 50s, but many continued into the 60s. White flight continues in our area today. With inner ring suburbs now becoming more diverse, there's a large growth spurt of whites into what we now call our outer suburbs, such as Clarence, Wheatfield, and Lancaster. On another world, during these years, the city became poor and the tax base fell as white families, businesses, healthcare facilities, even churches moved to the burbs. Living in these neighborhoods, car ownership becomes a luxury due to the high cost of the car loan and insurance. Remember, they're considered hazardous. You must then rely on public transportation to travel to higher paying jobs, doctor's appointments, and even shop. Public transportation that is spotty. Some sections of our area today have no service on Sundays. By car, what takes 20 minutes using public transportation may take over an hour and a half. Generational wealth in our country is built on home ownership and home equity. Homeowners in federally labeled hazardous areas that are able to get home mortgages and insurance pay extraordinarily high rates. With lack of access to better jobs and the unavailability of home equity loans, family homes may fall into disrepair. With the loss of good job opportunities and predatory loan practices, the homeowner may then enter into foreclosure, losing their home. These empty homes disintegrate further, and all too often, the city enacts a policy of leveling the home. Once was now someone's family home is now a neighborhood eyesore. How does this affect policing? If you live in green areas, there is protect and serve. Living in a neighborhood labeled hazardous, judgment and prejudices of the white community emerge and is embedded in a mostly white police force. You are now policed. Broken taillight, forgot to signal, appear suspicious, experiencing a mental health crisis, you are stopped, questioned, probably charged, and arrested with the all too high probability of losing your life. In our area, 27 inmates have died at the Erie County Holding Center since our present sheriff took office. I will close with one of our charges during my workshop. Do we have the capacity and the will to make change?
While I clean my glasses, if you want to look to the top of your order of service, I want to begin by reading the 8th principle out loud, because that's what we're here to talk about today. That's what I'm here to talk about. It says, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community, by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions." For 2 years, I've read these words of the 8th principle, and I've thought to myself, of course, I could vote today to affirm this principle. I have been longing to be held accountable for my actions, longing to move toward anti-racism and to dismantle systems of oppression. After our Jubilee 3 training, I joined an 8th Principle Facebook group and was surprised to find just how underprepared I am to make a real commitment to this principle. Because this commitment needs to be more than just something we feel is right. It needs to be more than something we believe in. We need to be well informed about how we plan to hold ourselves accountable for our actions. Many of the churches who've already affirmed the 8th principle have undertaken congregational studies. Some have studied the beloved community's curriculum. Some have undertaken a congregational study of a document called Widening the Circle of Concern, a report of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change. Some congregations undertook both of these before voting to affirm the 8th principle. And all of those congregations are committing to taking action to move forward. Because this isn't a principle you think about and say, yeah, that makes sense, I support this. It's one where you have to be ready to say, hey, this is so important that I'm ready to stand up and get to work. This 8th principle is scheduled for a full UUA vote at next year's General Assembly. If it passes, when it passes, it will become the 8th principle for all congregations in the association. My wish for our congregation is that we're able to stand shoulder to shoulder with 170 congregations and counting who have already affirmed this principle for their own congregations. I want to stand together with them at that momentous meeting and say yes. Yes, UUCB has studied this proposal deeply. Yes, UUCB has already voted to affirm this principle. And yes, UUCB has begun to work inside our community and inside our congregation and also in our surrounding community for these changes. In order to affirm this principle here in our congregation, we have some hard work ahead of us. I'm looking for people who are eager to engage in an 11-session review of Widening the Circle of Concern, that report from the UUA Commission on Institutional Change. Together, we will study our theology, the governance of our church, our congregation itself, our ways of welcoming and hospitality, how we live our values out into the world, what we expect from our religious professionals. I can't do all the fingers. You're going to have to count in your head. 7, education for liberation. Hint, whenever you're able to, please attend Jubilee 3. It was phenomenal. 8, innovations in risk-taking. 9, restorations and reparations. And 10, accountability and resources, with an 11th session for what do we do next as a congregation. At the same time, whether or not you're ready to commit to this study with me, we also plan to offer community building restorative circles on these same topics. Please think about your commitment to the 8th principle. Would you like to be part of a study group? Would you like to join in these community building circles? Come, join with us. And to quote from verse 3 of today's final hymn, Come Build a Land, together we'll be raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations, where justice shall roll down like waters.
Our first hymn is number 1051, We Are. I don't know about you, but I was a little confused when I got the order of service and the inserts. So if you separate it, there's one, just separate it, and you see the one that says, that's 1051, just take it out. And you want to look at where it says 1051, then turn it over, and then you're going to see a little arrow. And then you're going to open it up, and it's going to have, then it's going to have 3 and 4. Got it? This is a little puzzle that we put out for you this morning, just to make sure you're up awake. So, again, we're going to start with 1051.
And watch out for the big repeat in the middle of page 3 that goes back to page 1. So just, be aware of that little, yes. A lot of think about. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe. So we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe. So we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe. Oh, we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Let us now join our hearts and minds in a quiet moment of prayer, meditation, and reflection. Listen carefully. Can you still hear the song? The one sung for you when you were born. The song sung by a cosmos in motion, rejoicing at your life. You, the result. You, the outcome. You, the celebration. Listen carefully. Can you hear it still? A song of possibility, a reminder that we still have time to be who and what we need to be. Listen carefully. The vast expanse echoes a recognition that it's not always easy. Possibilities can be hard to pursue. Roads not taken, wrong turns, destinations that disappoint. Through this, the song persists. The universe sings no less because time and space wear us thin. The music calls us to recognize our limitations, to recognize that the song is best sung by others. Here in community, bringing alive the most primordial and original impulse, the desire to sing to the universe who we are, to celebrate and share our lives with others. Now let us open our worship space to all the names of our loved ones suffering in sorrow and celebrating in joy. Each name a breath, and each breath a prayer. Now I'll ask you again to rise as you are willing and able to sing hymn 21, We'll Build a Land. Again, kind of separate it out. Our little challenge this morning, and actually you can just open up that section to 121. And it's up.
Anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice land, building up ancient cities, raising up devastations from old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may them create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand the people. Oh, come, build a land, my people we seek. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may them create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Please rise in body or in spirit and recite with me the words for extinguishing the chalice as printed in your order of service. As we extinguish the flame of this chalice, may we carry its light with us into the world in the power of peace, faith, justice, and love. For today's benediction, I want to read to you the full poem that Reverend Joan uses for the beautiful words at the end of her benediction each week. And by full poem, it's really not long, but Wayne Arneson wrote, "Take courage, friends." Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, because deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Thank you.